cultured. I also read I also read some comics. I did sit down and read Universal Monsters Dracula #4. This is James Tynion, Martin Simmons, Russ Wooten, writer, art, and letters. If you don't know, this is a story about Dracula. Universal Pictures story of Dracula, reimagined by James Tynion, Martin Simmons, told in 4 issues of unparalleled beauty and horror. Those are my words. But very rarely these days do we get like a comic license from a film production company that meets this bar of like absolute perfection, I think. I couldn't give 2 shits about the actual Dracula story, if I'm being honest. Like, Bram Stoker's Dracula, fine, I guess, right? Like, just a bunch of old people kind of just, what are we going to do? There's a weird man. And I feel like James Tynion, Tynion and Martin Simmons, they take this idea and then they give it like an actual horror vibe to it. And, I haven't seen a lot of Dracula stuff, so maybe I just don't know if somebody's done this story better. But I feel like a lot of vampire stories focus on like the vampire themselves, and this series, Dracula is like a background character, right? He's barely in it, and when he does show up, he's like a secondary, tertiary moment to the actual story that's going on that follows all of the players of the story. So I think the thing that really sold me about this book is like 96% of it is Martin Simmons' art. Like, he clearly loves this story. He clearly was experimenting with some really interesting techniques. His art is just like absolutely beautiful paintings all the way down every single page, massive 2-page spreads where you can see the actual like chunks of paint still on the page. He was doing stuff with almost like collage where he's putting like almost like news film, and he's putting like lace and all this stuff onto the page so that we scanned it in. There's like this physical texture to it. I don't know how many other comic books are going this freaking hard to try to deliver a specific vibe and feeling, because characters are wearing lacy dresses the entire book, but like there are particular moments in the book where you can see like he was trying to evoke some sort of like actual 3D, like this layeredness to the characters on the page, by putting physical items on the page, and it's not just like paint splatter, it's like actual lace and string, and I don't know who's going
That's
hard like this these days.
Yeah.
In my mind, though, the last 2 issues of this series in particular were some of the most stunning, with, like I said, Simmons really amping up his game to deliver these super dramatic, super evocative things that weren't just like blood and guts and gore, but instead actual like weird metaphoric symbolic things that were trying to like get you to feel a specific feeling of horror or of shock or of loss. How many I don't really know how often we get this in these types of comics where creators are able to take this freedom to go extremely abstract with the way that they're telling their books. And not to say that like Dracula is some mind fuck that is just like you got to really like digest this book, because it's pretty plain and simple. It's the story of Dracula. But I feel like you could do this book panel by panel and you could get the exact same story out, but instead Simmons is like taking what could be a 12 panel like 2-page spread and breaking it into 4 panels with a massive wash of like mixed scenes all in one big huge picture. Very, very different vibe. And I cannot get over how just beautiful all the details of the art of this book was. But I don't want to say that James Tynion didn't really do anything in this book, because he clearly did. He wrote a very interesting way to portray this story, where we're getting everything from Renfield's perspective in a lot of ways, as Renfield is trying to like explaining things about his master, Lord Dracula, throughout the book, and how he's going to eventually get this power. And the final issue of this book really hammers like the I don't know, the pity that I think that you're supposed to feel for this character, and Tynion does a fantastic job of making sure you get that, because the book ends as dramatic as I'm sure every Dracula story ends, but with extra beats that I didn't expect to actually feel interested about. Like, we get the Dracula hunting, we get all this other stuff, but man, like this, for a 4-issue series, I haven't felt like this invested in such a simple story in a really, really long time. And I obviously very, very biased. I love this creative team, but also they freaking nailed it. They genuinely made Dracula like the plain and simple Dracula story, really, really interesting. And I have to like tip my hat to that. So go buy this as a trade when it comes out. If you can get these physical issues from your shop, you totally should. This book deserves all the love and praise that I know that it's getting out there. But the hype is absolutely real because it's real. It's a real solid book. So I don't know if you guys have been reading this at all, but man, I'm obsessed.
No, I've been sitting on it and with the intention of someday reading it, but I kind of came in with that's Dracula, it's gonna be
Sure.
it's gonna be the same song and dance, but
Uh-huh.
you've sold me like 100%. Like now I'm gonna have to go grab my issues off the stack and put them towards the top.
Well, you got all this free time now. You're not reading 116 comics in a month, right?
Am I though? I mean, back-to-back Planet Hulk, World War Hulk.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
All right.
It's just a different kind of 116 issues.